Okay, welcome to another live seminar with School 16. My name is Vadim Revzin.
I'm Sergey Revzin, his twin brother and co-founder, co-director here at School 16.
And today we're going to be talking about getting into tech without much experience. If you were at our event on Monday, we're going to be expanding on some of the topics that we covered on Monday's event, except it's not going to be guided with slides as much. And we do want to have it be as interactive as possible. We have a manageable group today. So what we're going to do in a few minutes here after our initial introduction is we're going to promote everybody to panelist status. What that means is it's going to be similar to any Zoom meeting where you'll be able to enable your video if you'd like. And that way we can have it be more of an interactive experience, not just over chat. If you're in a place where you can't turn on your video, not a big deal. You don't have to, but it could be a good opportunity for us to meet each other as well.
Great. So this is our agenda for today. Just quick introductions from us right now about who we are and School 16 is, if you're not familiar. Although we do see some familiar names here, so good to see you folks if we already know you. And we're really going to break down today a couple of different core topics as it relates to get into tech. One is going to be really talking about the business side of technology. That's what our focus is always here at School 16. So roles like sales, marketing, operations, and product. And we're going to break down exactly how you can become an attractive candidate for those roles, even if you don't have a whole lot of experience in tech. We're going to talk about some aspects of networking. We had a lot of questions on Monday about how do you actually go about building your network in tech and standing apart to people so they can give you opportunities. This is something that Vadim and I have developed several methodologies around in the last decade as we've transitioned careers many times in our lives. We're going to tell you some things that we've learned along the way there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to talk about yourself in a way that makes people want to work with you and want to hire you. We always talk about things from a tech or technology or startup angle, but this stuff is actually applicable regardless of what area you're in, what career you're in. But that being said, we have this agenda here. But as Vadim said a few minutes ago, we do want this to be as interactive as possible. We do these events. We really consider them almost like mini classes that you get to take part in, and we want you to get the most out of it. So that is why we're going to be promoting you all to panelists essentially here, so we can have a dialogue here. So do think of specific questions, reasons why you came here. Feel free to type that in, by the way, in the chat as well. We'd love to hear what you were hoping to learn today, because there's a lot of different ways we can take this discussion. We have our talking points prepared, but we do want to make sure we make it something that's useful for all of you.
Part of the reason why Sergey and I host classes like this is we do believe that the fastest learning happens when you're learning from practitioners that are currently in the field and learning from people that have gone through the experience that maybe you are looking to get clarity on. Think about maybe the best class you ever took in college, right? It was probably from someone that actually worked in the field that they're teaching you about. So if you're interested in more experiences like this, and if you haven't heard of School 16 before, there are some new faces here. Just a quick reminder that if you're looking to advance your career in tech, and especially around non-technical roles, we are making our final admissions decisions for our 8-week Technology Career Accelerator program, which is a part-time program where you get to learn marketing, sales, operations, and product management from people from top-tier tech companies and actually connect with them directly for opportunities or to advance quicker in your career. So you can apply on school16.co/program for that if you're interested. Also, if you want to hear more about these types of events that are open to the public, you want to invite future friends to this, if this is interesting and relevant for you, follow us on Instagram at School16Co, or just go to LinkedIn, type in School16, and our school will pop up there. And you can follow us on LinkedIn as well. We post about all our events typically there too, so that you don't miss anything. Okay.
Great.
So we're going to stop sharing the slides right now, and it looks like we can promote everyone here to a panelist. It's going to take me a second because you have to do it individually. But the way that this will work to start, just so you folks know, is no pressure to participate in the beginning. But of course, again, we encourage you to do so if you can, even if it's just raising a hand and dropping a question into the chat or raising a hand over video and dropping a question. But we're going to do it in a kind of like a discussion format to start, where Sergey and I will ask each other questions and cover the main points that we wanted to cover today. But again, if you have something specific that you wanted to address, then let's please make sure that you ask us during today's session, so that we make sure that you get as much value out of it as possible. All right.
Great. So Vadim now is going to go through and start promoting the attendees here to panelists again, so that you can participate if you'd like. But again, the way that we want to start the conversation, we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A between each other here, but we want you to ask questions as well. But we're going to start talking about some of the specific areas in tech that people are typically curious about, and how you can make yourself attractive to an employer depending on the type of role that you want, which is, whether you want that role or that job now, or whether you're looking to do it sometime in the future, in the next 6 months, year, 2 years, etc. There's also a lot of people that take our programs that come to these classes that are interested in entrepreneurship. If you're interested in questions specific to what do you do if you want to start a company someday, drop that in the chat. That's a little bit of a unique, specific question, but we talk about that a lot as well in our programs, because a lot of technology jobs can actually be a good pathway to entrepreneurship if that's something that you're interested in. So to start off, we're going to cover a little bit about how to get to jobs like product management. Again, we focus on product operations, sales, and marketing. Those are kind of the core, less technical areas of tech that typically there are lower barriers to entry to get in, but once you get in, they can be quite well paid, and you can get promoted relatively quickly in these roles. One of them that we're going to talk about today is product management, because we know a lot of folks that are interested in our programs and classes and generally in tech are curious about product management and how you even get into it. It's actually one of the jobs that's maybe a little bit harder to break into if you have very little or zero experience, if you've never done anything in tech, because it requires a baseline knowledge of how products are built and how those decisions are made. A lot of people have a misconception that you actually have to be technical or be an engineer before becoming a product manager, because product managers effectively manage engineers and how they spend their time. But that's actually a misconception. And Vadim has actually been, so Vadim is my co-founder here, before becoming an entrepreneur and becoming a professor himself, he started off in sales and ended up then transitioning to a role in product management. So he went from tech sales to sales engineering, which is a little bit more of a technical sales role, to then being a product manager, and then finally leading an entire product team, where he was leading a team of engineers and getting insights from the CEO of the company about how to make product decisions. So, Vadim, I wanted to ask you the first question, because I know you have experience going from a very non-technical role like sales to then being hired and eventually leading to a product manager role. Now, we've had a lot of speakers come to School16 events and even our instructors that talk about this, but I'm curious from your perspective, if you were somebody that was starting out now and you were thinking about a product manager role, what do you think you would focus on to make somebody want to hire you, even if, let's say, you're not technical?
Yeah, that's a good question. Before I answer that question, folks, everybody here got a prompt and it looks like was promoted to a panelist. And so there's a few other folks that are coming in that will promote as well. If you'd like, your video is automatically disabled. If you would like, feel free to enable your video. That way this will feel like we're a little bit more in person and we'll get to know you and put a face to the name. If you can't, or you're in a location where you can't enable video, no problem at all, but you do have the option, or you should, I should say, have the option to do that. Okay, so feel free to enable your video if you can. All right, so to answer Sergey's question, if I was looking for a product management job now, I would do something similar to what I did before to actually land these opportunities. And the tactics apply because fundamentally, in the end of the day, for a product role, there's a couple of different things that usually you're being tested for. One, it's your ability to synthesize information from disparate sources and actually make intelligent product decisions. Two, it's your ability to work with technical talent, which means gaining their trust and being able to communicate between the business teams, the people that are selling the product, typically the executive team and the like, and the engineering team. And also to prove your ability to quickly learn. Depending on the technology company that you're working with and for, depending on their tech stack, depending on their tech team, there's going to be different needs and a level of understanding that you will need about the product. And so I've worked across a bunch of different industries. You can take coding classes, but you will never learn everything that you need for every single job out there, right? And so that's why it's so important to be flexible too. Even if you're an engineer, by the way, one of the ways that you prove your value as an engineer is by proving your ability to pick up new tech languages, for example, and frameworks very quickly. Similar thing with a product role as well. So what I would do in that case, if I have no technical experience at all, if I have zero understanding of what it even means to build a piece of software, I would try to build an app or something myself, or even a website or a landing page, something that helps me learn through my own experience what it's like to bring something to life that somebody else might interact with. And so the way that I did it in the past is twofold. One, I started building websites. And at the time, I did not want to build websites from scratch, even though I knew HTML, a little bit of JavaScript and CSS. I did not know enough to build something like that from scratch. So I started looking into CMSs. This was before Squarespace and Wix, where it's all drag and drop functionality. WordPress was something that was already really popular. I would notice by using the inspect element tool on Chrome that websites like CNN and other massive publications were actually hosted on WordPress. So I thought, okay, that's probably a pretty good skill for me to learn. And through that, I learned that a lot of the backend in WordPress is actually in PHP. So I had to learn how to decipher PHP code. I had to learn how to put together a hosted website on my own server, which meant that I had to look at a database and see how all those files are organized. And that was not an easy process. It took 3 months, I think, for me to build a very basic website. But then I was able to put that on my resume and say I actually built something. And sure enough, when I was applying for, at that time, it was sales engineering roles, I could speak to the fact that I actually knew how to put together a website at the very least. And
So why was that useful, by the way? I mean, because I'm sure people are listening here and thinking, okay, well, are you actually going to be building websites for this company? Like, why do they care about your ability to build a website? And did you actually do that in your day to day?
I did end up doing it in the day-to-day, maybe a year later. Our whole website was built by the developer and managed by the developer at the company, the CTO. And every time the CEO needed to make a change, they'd have to call on them. And I decided, hey, we should host this on WordPress. So I actually ended up doing it for that company. But that's not why I was hired. The reason that I was hired is it clearly showed to them that I knew how to create something out of nothing, starting from zero. And that I could do that pretty effectively and rapidly. The other thing that I leveraged that I'm skipping here is the fact that I had worked for an early stage startup before that. There was 5 people. I was only doing sales, not even technical sales. I was only doing sales. But the reason why I took that job with 5 people and I was getting paid, I think about $30,000 a year at that point, I was there for 6 months with equity, of course. So I wasn't making much money at the time, and I took a pay cut from my previous job. But the reason why I took that job is because I wanted to work closely with a CTO. And if you're in a 5-person company, you're going to work closely with a CTO. But that's another thing that I could speak to, because through that experience, I helped them evaluate contract engineers. I had to learn the difference between front end and back end developers. I had to understand the tech stack that our software product was built on. And I was essentially becoming more and more intelligent through the process by embedding myself into it. Yeah, you all probably have heard before that most of what you learn for any job, you end up picking up those direct skills on the job. If you've gone the engineering route, you learn that. You learn a lot of theory in college, for example. But when you become a software developer, every company is going to have their own environment, the way that it's set up. They're going to have their own tech stack again, and you're going to have to learn that anyways. And so I was doing that at that startup, and I was able to leverage that experience for this company because I actually knew how to deal with engineers already.
So I think to sum up, and because I know this story intimately too, because I remember talking to Vadim, and I was still in a sales role, and I was wondering how he was able to get a product role after doing sales. Essentially, it's not that he had to code really day to day for his job. He had to understand how to put together a website using a content management system, which is WordPress, which you don't need to be technical for. But it's more so that he at least understood, okay, this is what JavaScript does. This is what HTML does. This is what CSS does. So that when an engineer talked to him, he wasn't telling them this is how you should write your code. But when an engineer said, hey, this is going to take us 2 weeks to do, and why is this feature important to the customer, Vadim would be able to help them prioritize their time and what they did when they were coding, because he understood how the systems work and approximately what it meant when you were going to build a new type of product, and he can translate what his customers needed into what the engineer understood through language, through understanding the words.
The other thing that it helped me do is understand what would be required of a particular feature request, understand how much effort you would need, how much development time it could potentially take, and the like. The reason why a lot of startup organizations actually experience friction internally is oftentimes the business side or the sales team, they're not technical enough to understand the challenges of the engineering team, and vice versa. The engineering team does not really understand the challenges of the sales team and how difficult it might be to close an enterprise client, for example. And the best way to win over technical people in any organization is to actually help them with their job whenever possible, but also understand their challenges, right? Not ask for the world, for example, or ask for a massive feature update for a customer when maybe that's only going to result in a little bit extra revenue, but might take 6 months to develop. And that's another, I think, really important skill that I developed over time is being able to intelligently predict how long it might take to actually develop something before I even came to an engineer.
So we're going to move on to another type of role outside of product management, but I think it's a fascinating topic because a lot of people don't understand how those hiring decisions are made. I do want to tell you one quick story of a woman who actually went through one of our previous programs, or one of our tech career acceleration programs, who had really no product management experience, but was able to get a job in it. And how she did it was she came from the clinical trial space. So she was working in healthcare for about 6 years, but didn't have really any experience with coding or development or tech at all. What she did do is she thought of a product that could help the elderly essentially improve their posture. It's something that's a big problem that she saw while working in the healthcare field. And she really essentially what she did is she mocked up a design of what a piece of hardware would look like that could help somebody walk better, and how it could connect to a mobile device in order to give them notifications when they were not walking the right way. It sounds actually very simple, but by going through that design process, she ended up creating a prototype of this product over the course of a couple of months and talking to some people and using 3D printers and all the like. And she didn't actually create a startup out of it. And she didn't sell this product to anybody. But in that process, she interviewed about 50 elderly people to understand their problems with posture and how it affected their lives day to day and pain, etc. Well, she was able to use that project. It's actually something that she didn't never talked about on her interviews or her resume. But when we told her that she should really be focusing on that product and project that she worked on in interviews, she was not only able to get more interviews in technology companies, but she actually started getting interviews in product management roles because people were impressed by her ability to interview a lot of customers, understand what those customers need, right? And then design something based on specifications that she developed from what she learned about what the problem is. So even though she wasn't a technical person, she wasn't going to be building this mobile app, she probably wasn't even going to be building the hardware itself. By going through that exercise and that design process, she was able to demonstrate to employers that she has the ability to manage product decisions. Even though she didn't have tech experience, she ended up then getting a job in a tech company in the healthcare field, actually. So she leveraged her experience in healthcare to get a job in a healthcare tech company. So there's a way that you can leverage your side projects and experiences to convince employers that even if you don't have a lot of experience in a particular area, you can get a job in that. So, good.
Yeah, before we move on to the next topic, we're going to take a pause right here. And if anybody has any questions, you can drop it in the chat, but also feel free to unmute yourself and we'll give you the opportunity to ask a question now.
So yeah, so if there's any reason why you decided to join this event today, we'd love to hear what is something that you were hoping to learn here, and then we can touch on those topics. Anyone have any questions? Great. So I'm going to assume you're just shy and not asking. So while we talk here, please do type your questions in the chat. We'd love to hear them. You don't have to speak up. It's okay. But we'd love to see the questions in the chat because we know there's a particular reason why you came to this event today. And we want to make sure you get the most out of it. We have about another half hour, 40 minutes or so that we have together. So we'd love to answer any questions that you might have.
So, and a few things that we're going to cover before the event is done. We're going to talk about we're going to give you some advice on how to rapidly develop your network, if that's something that you're looking to do, which actually most of you should, most likely. We're going to talk about a couple of other career paths as well, like tech sales. So
great. Okay. So speaking of career paths, so product management is one that we talked about. Another role that there's a lot of demand right now that actually tends to pay quite well, even at the entry level, because there's not a lot of people that are, that have developed deep expertise in it, and that's marketing. Now, marketing has a lot of different functions within it, and in a technology company, marketing can also mean a lot of different things. There's brand marketing, there's product marketing, there's social media marketing, event marketing. And depending on the kind of company you want to work for and the skills that you have or the things that you're even curious or interested in, you might want to pursue a different part of marketing. One that I missed is growth marketing as well. So knowing how to spend money to make money essentially for a company. So, Vadim, do you have any thoughts about how someone might go and be able to very quickly add something to their resume to get a company excited about hiring them in a marketing or growth marketing role? Because again, even entry level roles there tend to pay $50,000 to $60,000, and then once you become a little more experienced, 5 years of experience, they can pay well over $100,000. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, and you might not even need 5 years of experience if you're joining a rapidly growing company. But it depends, of course, on, because you listed a couple of different functions within marketing. But if we take, let's say, growth marketing, for example, pretty straightforward. With any of these examples, by the way, as you can tell now, what you want to really convey to the employer or hiring manager or the startup that you're pursuing, if you found a company that you're really excited about, is that you can actually do the job that they're hiring you for, that you can hit the ground running, that you have some tangible things that you've done that prove your ability to actually do well in that role. Most people that are applying for jobs do not do that. They skip that step entirely, and they hope that the hiring manager will connect the dots for them. That is a big mistake. They're missing an opportunity to really get ahead of the line. So, for example, if you're doing growth marketing and you're going to be doing paid campaigns and you've never touched Facebook advertising, that's a big thing that you're missing, because most likely it's going to be part of your job. So either find a local nonprofit or a small business that you can help out, whether it's for free or on a volunteer basis, or maybe even as a cheap contractor, and set up some paid campaigns for them and run those campaigns. You're going to learn end to end what that requires. You're going to learn how to track conversions. You're going to learn what a Facebook pixel is and how to implement it on their website and the like. And more importantly, you're going to have some results, hopefully, that you get for them. If you don't get any results, you can iterate, and eventually you will get some results. And you'll be able to speak to that intelligently throughout the interview process. The biggest mistake people make is they'll read about this stuff and they think, okay, I have enough to go into a interview and actually talk about it intelligently. But until you do it yourself, you will not have worked through the problems that they actually need you to deeply understand to convey that you at least have some expertise. So that's one example.
Marketing is really, marketing roles, again, they very much so differ, but it really is all about becoming an expert in running experiments. So you have an idea about how you can attract visitors to a website or people to an event that could then eventually become customers. And then you test that idea and see if it works. And if it does, sometimes it costs nothing. Like hosting an event can cost nothing. Sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money on advertising to do it. But essentially getting very, very good about running experiments. And if you're going to interview for any marketing role, but in particular a growth marketing role, the best thing you can do in an interview is talk about experiments that you've run that worked, right? Were you put in charge of hosting an event, for example, to get 100 people there, and you were able to get 100 people signed up in the course of 3 weeks? Well, how did you do that? Companies want to know answers to those questions. Are you applying to a social media, for example, manager type of role, right? We've had, for example, social media marketing internships that we would put up, and people apply saying they love marketing and they're experts in social media, but then you look at their social profiles and they have no followers, right? So as simple as that is showing an ability to have one social profile where you've attracted a lot of followers is going to convince employers then you can do that for them. It doesn't mean you have to have years of marketing experience, but it does mean you have to have something tangible to point to.
And by the way, especially if you're targeting opportunities within startups, startup can mean a lot of different things. Some people still call Facebook a startup. Obviously, it's a massive organization with thousands and thousands of people, so I wouldn't say it's a startup. But for our definition of startup, I would say anywhere from 15 to 100 employees. There are a lot of companies that are in the stage where they raised 10, 20, $30 million. They quickly grew from 30 to 100 people, and there's a lot of opportunities within these types of companies as well. But one of the best ways to stand out for any role, it could be product management, it could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be operations related roles, customer success, doesn't matter. One of the best ways to stand out for any role within a tech company is not only to be able to intelligently speak about your experience, let's say as a marketer or as a salesperson, maybe in another industry, but also to understand how that whole organization functions and how all the different departments work as well. Tech, unlike most other sectors, is incredibly cross-functional. So if you're going in as a marketer and you can communicate what it's like to work with a product management team or the product marketing team, right? Obviously, that you would be working with closely if you're working on launches, again, you're going to skip levels ahead of the other people that are interviewing that maybe have experience as a marketer, but in a different industry, and they can't speak to that because they don't really know how startups work and how the different departments work together. So that's another way to stay differentiated, or to become differentiated, I should say, is to get a deep understanding of how the other departments function, maybe even for roles that you are not pursuing.
By the way, folks, if you're not sure about some terminology that we're using here or what we mean by something, put that in the chat. There's no such thing as a bad question. There's people here with various levels of experience, and we're happy to answer anything. So please, if you're sitting confused about something or something's not clear, that shouldn't be the case. You can ask us. We're a relatively small group here.
Cool. So let's shift gears. Actually, we'll take another pause right now before moving on to the next question. If anybody has a question, feel free to unmute yourself or drop it into the chat. Okay, excellent. So I want to talk about sales, if we can shift gears a little bit. Obviously, a lot of these roles are related. For example, in product management, oftentimes you're doing discovery calls with customers where you're trying to understand their pain points. Sales, you do something very similar, obviously. But let's take two scenarios, Sergey. One, I have zero sales experience. I don't want to get into tech. Two, I have sales experience, let's say working in a particular industry. Maybe I was doing sales for the renewable energy industry. Maybe I was coming from investment banking, which involves some sales as well. But let's say I do have some sales experience. Okay, let's start with that example. I have some sales experience, completely unrelated industry, no idea how to sell software. I'm interested in B2B sales, business to business sales, or enterprise sales, because I know you get a very high base salary. But how will I know to speak to my ability to sell tech software, especially something technical, if I have zero experience in that? But I do have sales experience, and I have a quota that I've carried. I've brought in maybe even millions of dollars for particular organizations. How do I convey that I could be good in that role? Or what skills do I need to develop before I'm taken seriously for that type of role? What would you do?
Well, I think, look, if I come from a sales background, but I've never done technology sales, my number one job in the beginning is to convince somebody, like Vadim said earlier, that I can learn systems quickly. Meaning, if I'm going to be selling someone's product, I better understand why companies, if I'm doing B2B sales, right, business to business sales, why companies find value in that product and what does it actually help a company do to solve their problems, right? To make more money, save money, hire people, whatever it might be they're trying to do with a piece of software. So any company that I apply, I need to play around with the tool, sign up for a demo, maybe call their sales team and see how do they pitch the product, use the product so I can really understand how it works and talk about it intelligently in an interview. And more importantly, talk about why it brings value to the customer, because your job as a salesperson will be to convince somebody of the value of the product and why it solves the problem. So that's your job to really make clear. So I would really just start getting comfortable with different technology tools. You don't have to learn how to code for that. You don't have to be even technical for that. You just have to have an ability to play around with the piece of software, technology, cloud-based software, whatever it might be, and just use it and understand what it's for. And that might mean watching some tutorial videos on YouTube. So it's not rocket science, but it does require research ahead of time.
If you really want to go deep, another thing I would add to that is going back to the advice we gave earlier. If you want to be a product manager, learn how to manage the development of a product by hiring an outsourced team. You can do that as a sales, if you're looking for a tech sales job as well, because again, that will force you to learn what it actually takes to develop a piece of software. But the other thing that I would start digging into is, what does it mean to actually sell software? What is the process like? If it's for an enterprise sales customer, Typically, that means there's a lot of different stakeholders involved. How do you manage a sales process with multiple stakeholders? How do you make sure that you get them to the next level so that they're that much more likely to close? And starting to touch on some of that will mean that when you're going into these interviews, you're going to sound that much more intelligent.
Right, that's exactly right. And then just a quick story to touch on Vadim's example, and we'll get to your question, Vanessa, here. Thanks for asking it. Is the example of somebody that has no experience in sales at all. And so how are you going to convince somebody to give you a job selling their product if you've never sold anything before? Well, one thing that I've actually seen somebody do that I thought was brilliant when they were trying to get a sales job is they took a look at their dream company. They did this for a couple of different companies, startups technology companies that they wanted to work for. And they went and they looked at the list of customers that a company had, right? So a lot of companies will list their customer list or the types of companies they serve if it's business to business right on their websites. And they saw that one of their primary type of customers was restaurants. So they sold software to businesses like restaurants. Then what this person did right after applying to the sales job is they went and they reached out to 10 local restaurants in the area, essentially to talk to them about their problems and try to understand why that product could potentially be helpful. And they even mentioned the product. So the company that they were interviewing for, they said, I'm not affiliated with that company, but I think this product could potentially help you. So they essentially started doing the job of a salesperson before getting the job. And once they got the interview, so they actually reached out to the people hiring and they said, hey, I've been doing a lot of research in your company. I don't have much sales experience, but I've been talking to people to restaurants that might be interested in your product. I'd love to tell you what I learned. And I can guarantee you that no one else that applied to that job did that. You're not going to do that for every job that you apply to, but if you have 2 or 3 companies that you really want to work for, doing something like that where you're demonstrating your ability to do the job, even though you've never done the job before, is the surefire way to get somebody's attention, especially if it's a small company or a startup company. So really, really important. There are ways to get people's attention, even if you have no experience at all.
And the other thing that I want to make sure we mention is understanding how to skip levels, right? That's a lot of what we talk about. But if you're trying to get into a tech company without any tech experience, but you do have some industry or domain expertise, that's where your approach should be focused. We mentioned this in our event on Monday for those of you that went there, but we'll say it again. If you work with nonprofits, that's where your domain expertise is in. Target technology companies that sell to nonprofits. If you worked in the government sector, in real estate, in working with education, for example, in education, again, you're going to stand out from other people that may have more experience in tech, but are not domain experts like you. And while there may still be some gaps you need to address, this is how you make sure that you're actually getting your foot in the door for certain opportunities.
So we had a question here from Vanessa, and you mentioned that you've heard Scrum Master is a good way to get into tech. Helps identify yourself as somebody that has project management skills. Vadim, what do you know about the need for that, how attractive it is, and maybe any other tools needed to show yourself as an effective project manager?
I'm going to my opinion is that it deeply varies. So if we're going to break it down, project management at its core is a highly operational function. You need to be very process and systems oriented. You need to be incredibly organized, and hopefully you have a lot of experience with, at the very least, simple tools like Excel and spreadsheets to maybe more advanced tools like certain maybe project management tracking systems or even ticketing systems and the like, which aren't that hard to pick up. But depending on the type of company you target, again, some of them, if they're the bigger the companies, occasionally bigger companies will like to see maybe some kind of project management certification, like a PMP certification. For most people, I don't think that's necessary. I've seen many people in project management roles that do not have that certification. But what you do need to do is be able to prove your ability to be an operator effectively and to manage a lot of different moving pieces. Scrum Master in particular, it's going to depend. There are some organizations that still follow the Scrum development technique, where you're essentially helping manage engineering talent through that process. That's just one framework to work with engineers. Does that mean that that can be useful if you know and understand it? Yes. Do you need to be a Scrum Master, a certified Scrum Master, to get opportunities for that? Not necessarily. Again, it's also one framework. Other tech companies might not even follow that framework. Exactly. So could having that certification or becoming a scrum master help you get into project management? Maybe it could, but it's probably going to get you part of the way there. And really what you should be thinking about is, why am I interested in project management? What kind of companies do I want to do project management for? Because it's pretty broad. If you're going for a really large organization, you look at the job description, it'll probably say you need to have 10 years of experience as a project manager. Well, you shouldn't be applying to jobs where the lift or the ability to prove that you have that you can do the job is going to be that much more difficult, because the bigger the company, the more specialized the role. And yeah, oftentimes it will have all these different requirements. But for the smaller companies, oftentimes you do not need that requirement, or a certain certification like that to get a job.
But it's a good question, Vanessa, and it's good that you even know what those words mean. A lot of people, they might be in a situation or an interview situation for, let's say, a project management job. If they are asked, are they familiar with the Scrum methodology? And if the answer is no, obviously that doesn't look very good. So at least understanding the terminology, what does it mean? What are the core techniques? That'll get you far enough in an interview conversation. And then you can talk about how you've emulated those techniques, perhaps in other jobs, other projects that you worked on. Because again, it's not the methodology is not that difficult. It's just understanding the value of it and what you can do to emulate the principles of it.
Now, if you're looking at a job description and it says Scrum certification preferred, then at the very least you should study it in depth so that you can speak to it intelligently during an interview. That would be the first step.
Great.
Okay, good question.
Other questions, folks, do we have here? Because we're going to be shifting gears a little bit for the rest of the conversation, talking about networking, building your network. Again, we had a lot of questions on Monday about that, so we want to talk about how do you actually start building relationships with employers that increases your likelihood of getting opportunities here. But feel free to ask questions, either anything that we mentioned in the past here, or maybe if you're curious about a specific role and you want to talk about that, or you have a specific question like Vanessa did, feel free to ask that.
And we'll try to address it as good as we can. The one thing I'll mention before we move on, and sort of the moral of this whole discussion we've been having for the last half hour or so, is that you sometimes need a stepping stone in order to get the opportunity that you actually want. And waiting for somebody to get you a job as an entry level person, for example, waiting for somebody to even get you a paid opportunity is not something you have to do if it's just not working. I mean, it could be your strategy is wrong, but there are other alternative ways to get this experience without waiting for permission for somebody else. We gave you many examples there, whether you're building something yourself, doing volunteer work and the like. This is hard work, by the way. We're not saying this is easy, but this is where the learning happens. And again, you're starting to acquire points of proof that you can then show to the employer. So the moral of this is project work. A lot of people think I need to have full-time experience. I need to be working 40 hours a week in something for somebody to consider me. Absolutely not. If you spend even a month working towards something, you will know more about that area than 99% of the population. Same goes with any domain expertise that you might have. And so it doesn't mean you have to spend months or years in working in a particular field or dissecting something. There are more effective ways to get your foot in the door much, much faster and get into tech without as much experience as you think you might need.
Yeah, definitely agree with that, and we've seen it happen time and time again. So this is not theoretical. This is based on lived experiences, and a lot of people that we've seen get into various tech careers and change jobs too, change careers several times within tech. That's one of the, I think, unique aspects of technology as a sector broadly, is that you can start in one type of job in tech, and in a couple of years realize that you want to do something else, and you can actually make those transitions within companies and then across companies as well. It's very, very possible, which is part of the fun of entering it as an industry. It's pretty flexible. So let's talk about the aspect of actually building relationship with employers, and some real tactical information I want to give you on how to build relationships with employers, because a lot of people don't spend a lot of time networking or thinking about it. Some of us maybe are a little bit older and we haven't never really done it too, and it feels uncomfortable. You kind of feel like, well, my network is what it is, or I just don't know a lot of people. So where do I even start? And that's something that almost everyone has to face with.
Yeah, and some people it's more comfortable for them. Other people, you have to get over a little bit of fear. For example, all of the above are totally normal. The reason why we're talking about it though today even though you've probably heard other people talk about networking, is it is still really underutilized as a way to get your foot in the door for certain opportunities. People are afraid to ask for help. People are afraid to reach out to people they don't know. People are afraid to even reach out to people that they do know, to see if they can get introductions and the like. And this is where we've seen others and ourselves make moves the fastest if they're able to prioritize this work. It's very easy to sit there, find jobs with keywords, click a one button apply, and hope that somebody responds to you. That is not the way that most people find the best jobs. You certainly can get lucky. I've even found jobs that way as well, but it is not the best way to do it and the most optimized way to do it. And the people that we know that are in tech that actually get promoted the fastest, that get the best opportunities, and other people are like, how did they get this job? This is a dream job. After working in tech for only a year or two, is they make it known that they are looking for these jobs, and they're constantly asking others for meetings, for help, for insight, for advice, and the like. And so this is a really important muscle to activate. If you don't do this at all, even if you start doing it, allocating a little bit of your time to this, you're guaranteed to start seeing results and being remembered and recalled when opportunities do come up.
So speaking of being remembered, I think that's actually a core thing to start with here, right? So let's say you're starting from scratch, like me and Vadim, when we came to New York 8 years ago, we didn't know a single person in the city. We had no family here, no friends here, no. He lined up a job actually coming here, but I had no job when I first came to New York, and so it was quite daunting, this prospect of having to build relationships. The first thing that I would say you should work on is learning how to talk about yourself and learning how to talk about how you can bring value to other people and other organizations. That is really a core tenet to networking and starting to network. Yes, of course, part of it is you're going to be asking for things, asking for favors, asking for introductions. But also, it's about being able to communicate how you can help others out and how you can bring value to them. Because if you start with that, if you start thinking about how can I bring value to other people, the prospect of networking actually becomes a lot easier, right? Then that means you know what you're going to talk about if you're going to go to an event and approach someone. That means you know what you're going to mention if you're going to reach out to somebody or ask for an introduction and try to be helpful yourself. So that's, I think, the first key aspect of it, because networking is everything from how you talk to people when you go to events, to how you talk to people when you reach out to them on LinkedIn, to how you ask somebody for an introduction over email, or call someone, or serendipitously meet them after they gave a talk at a conference, right? All of those things are parts of networking, and all of them also involve you presenting yourself as someone that's trustworthy, that people should give an opportunity to because they're going to do really good work, right? So let's say, Vadim, that maybe you can think back to when we first came to New York and you were starting to build up your network. But can you think back to what were some of those things that you learned early on about how to talk about yourself, and maybe an example of how you reached out to somebody and asked for help in a way that they, actually wanted to help you? So you got an introduction or got that opportunity that you wanted to?
Well, in terms of talking about myself, you have to think about what's top of mind, what's important to you, what you spend a lot of your time thinking about, what maybe you're passionate at a given time. And so at the time, I had left finance to work in sales, in tech sales, and I had moved to New York to become a sales engineer. And so the story that was top of mind for me was how I transitioned from finance in a career that I didn't like to actually learning sales after starting the job and being really bad at it, quite frankly, but learning how to do it pretty rapidly. And then coming here to become a little bit more technical and start working as a sales engineer. So that story of how I transitioned careers was part of my narrative. And I really refined it, like how I made the decision to get into tech, how I learned how, fundamentally what's required to be successful in these roles and the like, and my learning experience through building websites and the like. And so I think I just created a quick 1-minute story about myself. And I personally, I wasn't doing as much outreach on LinkedIn back then. That's what I would do now. I would go to in-person events. And so, me and Sergey have always been thinking about startup ideas, but that's one of the narratives that I had is that I just moved to New York and I want to become more technical. I want to work closer with product and engineering teams. I'm really excited about how engineers think and I want to be able to help them. That's what truly drives me. And that's the narrative that I had about myself, it also showed some expertise, right? Because obviously I was able to get my foot in the door for opportunities within tech. Something else might be, speaking about your personal narrative about a domain expertise that you already developed. If you're thinking about different startup ideas and you're actually doing some work towards them, that's another lane that you can pick and develop a story around that. And this can change on a week to week, on a month to month basis, by the way. Our personal narrative isn't static. That story does change over time. And so I think the more time I spent and the more networking events I was going to, I would kind of see how people would react to my story, see what they would cling on, and also be inquisitive about the other person too. When you're building relationships with others, you want to make sure that you're showing them that you care about them too, so not just talking about yourself.
So you might be listening, you might be sitting here listening, thinking, I thought you were going to give me some tactics on building my network, but you're telling me to, you need to know how to tell stories and talk about yourself. Why is that important? That is actually, believe it or not, the number one thing that people miss and they think they already are good at. And the fact is that they actually have never prioritized it. What I mean by that is most people in a given situation, when someone asks them, tell me about yourself, right? They actually don't know how to answer that in a good way. They start rambling and talking about all the things that they've done professionally, let's say, and then they say all the things that they want to do. Oftentimes it's really broad and it's not specific, and they're trying to kind of keep their options open. And that really comes out because if you don't know how to talk about yourself and what you want, and really why you've done the things you've done, because people want to know your motivations, they want to understand you as a human. If you don't know how to talk about those things, immediately a lack of confidence comes out in the conversation. And when people feel like you're not confident, or when they feel like you're needy, or when they feel like you're desperate, naturally they're not going to give you opportunities. On the flip side, when they hear you talk and they hear motivation in your voice, they hear passion, they hear why you decided to learn the things you did, why you did that job that you did, even if it was not a good job, why you did it, and why you're looking for the next thing and want their help to get the next thing. When they hear that motivation and when they see what you've done to actually try to improve your prospects, when Vadim was talking about that story of, I came to New York to work closer with engineers and be a product person, even though I come from sales. He wasn't just saying, I want to work with engineers. He said, in my last job in sales, I made sure to work, to communicate with our technical team almost every day so I could learn about their needs, right? So he actually showed and demonstrated how he's making progress toward that thing. And that is a key thing to get really good at. We spend a lot of time in School16 in our programs helping people craft their narrative, because that's the number one thing that's going to determine your success when you're actually trying to build your network and interact with other professionals.
And the little things matter, by the way. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, obviously you should by now, but think about what people see when they land on your LinkedIn profile. How do they feel about it? Maybe even have a friend that reads through it that maybe hasn't seen it before that can give you some critical feedback, somebody that you trust. But you mentioned tactics. Before we address your question, Vanessa, let's talk about some tactics. I want to develop my network in tech very quickly. What would I do? Well, I'm going to start off, and maybe Sergey, you can add something to this, but we like to do with everything, by the way, we like to do what we call LHF, low hanging fruit. Where can you start where you already have some advantage? Why reinvent the wheel? Why start from zero? You probably have some kind of advantage that you can leverage already. So first of all, I would open up my phone. I stole this technique, by the way, from Jordan Harbinger. He's a famous podcaster, also a buddy of ours, because we have a podcast too, and we've been on a show. But this is his advice. You go open up your phone, you go through your text. You can't see it on my phone right now. My most recent text is from my mom. But if I scroll down, there are people here that are friends or acquaintances that I may have exchanged some text with, but I haven't caught up with them in months, maybe even longer. Reconnect, send a quick message. Especially if they're in tech. I would prioritize those folks, but most likely somebody else that is in your network already knows somebody that has been successful in tech or works in tech. So start there, reconnect, say, hey, we haven't talked in a while. How have you been? Anything new? And just start that conversation. And at the end, you could tell them, hey, I'm interested in startups and technology. Do you know anybody that I could talk to about their career path? That's it. You can ask one person for 2 or 3 introductions. And even if they give you just one, and you reached out to 10 people, you just doubled the number of people that you know in tech.
Now, just so you don't miss it here, because this is simple, but it's actually really critical. The tactic here is not hey, I'm going to text people, just people that I know. It's actually, the tactic is carving out, let's say, an hour, or not even an hour, 15 minutes, 2, 3 times a week to actually go through and actually do this, because it's the habit of continuously doing outreach that's going to get you results. So if you just do this once, you go text a couple of people right now, this is not going to result in much, right? You need to reach out to tens of people, even hundreds over time, to really see results. And just because someone doesn't help you doesn't mean that someone else doesn't want to. So it's sitting down a couple times a week for 10, 15 minutes and sending these messages to people, even if, let's say, low hanging fruit, like Vadim said, their previous contacts that you might have in your phone. The other thing to touch on Vanessa's question, which is, are there platforms that you should use like LinkedIn, Clubhouse, Slack, etc.? Well, the answer is all of the above, but the better answer is whichever ones you're most comfortable with. New platforms, let's say like Clubhouse. If you don't know about Clubhouse, it's a audio only platform, which is essentially kind of like live podcasts or live events, audio events that you can join if you have an iPhone, and you can sign up and actually then go and join these events, sometimes talk at them, contribute, ask questions, and build relationships with people. It's great to join new platforms like Clubhouse, because a lot of times, first of all, a lot of techies will adopt the platforms first, right? So back in 2008, when Twitter started, if you joined Twitter early on, you were now mingling with a bunch of people in tech who were just exploring Twitter. Clubhouse is in the same phase right now. You go in there, you can interact with CEOs of companies because everybody's on there now because it's a new platform. So new platforms create new opportunities to interact with people that otherwise maybe you wouldn't have a chance with to do so. Clubhouse is one good way of doing it if you like that method, the audio method.
By the way, it's important not just to interact in those settings, but to also follow through and follow up with them if there is an opportunity. You know, what we see happen actually a lot of times in Clubhouse is somebody else will say, yeah, drop me a note, or they'll comment on something that somebody said. And if they're an expert that you want to connect with, maybe they didn't offer to connect with you, but go find them on LinkedIn, add them immediately, maybe follow up and say, hey, I really love the talk that you gave, or the advice that you gave at this Clubhouse event. And right away, you're going to stand out from everybody else, because trust me, 99% of people do not do this at all. Whenever somebody follows up with us after an event like this, and by the way, folks, there's some folks here that are students in our next cohort. There are some folks here that we've never met before. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, go ahead and add us on LinkedIn. Why not? We want to be part of your network too. We already met through this event.
So speaking of LinkedIn, and you mentioned Slack as well, essentially the short answer is you want to go wherever the communities are that you want to access. So Slack, there's a bunch of different free communities. In fact, if you Google tech communities or tech Slack groups, you can invite yourself into different Slack groups and join those communities so you can see what the conversations are all about in those communities and build relationships with people that way. LinkedIn is really par for the course. Everyone needs to have a LinkedIn profile and fill it out and have it be updated, simply because so many employers nowadays, they'll check LinkedIn just to get a sense of your background. And you might even be able to be found by recruiters and get people reaching out to you there if you have some interesting previous background as well. So having a profile that's updated there is great, because LinkedIn is a platform that everybody's on already, knowing that the purpose of it is to network. So if you go and add somebody that you'd like to build a relationship with, they're that much more likely to accept you if you have a built-out profile, if you have enough connections and the like, because they know that you're on there to build relationships. And you can do outreach on LinkedIn, you can comment on people's posts, you can engage with them on their posts, and that's how they become part of your network. And I'll give you a quick example of this. I had a business idea that I was working on years ago, and I reached out to this woman just to get her advice. She was a sales executive at a company, a startup back then, and I wanted to get advice from her on this product business that I was trying to build. It was just an idea, and I just wanted advice from her. And in fact, I reached out cold on LinkedIn and told her, hey, I have this business idea. I'd love to hear your advice. And we talked for about 15 minutes on the phone one day. And that was 6 years ago. 6 years later, I noticed that she was a VP of sales now at Google. And I was looking for speakers for School16, where I wanted somebody like a Google executive to come in and speak to people like you. And so 6 years later, having not talked to her at all, but just being connected with her on LinkedIn, I reached out to her and I said, hi, Daisy, would you be willing to speak to a group? I just started a company called School16, and they would be grateful to hear from your experience. I know you're an awesome professional. By the way, congratulations on the Google job. I know she just got it like 3 months before that. And she responded the next day saying yes, and she came and she gave a talk to our event, and she's done several times since then. And again, this is someone that I didn't have a deep relationship with, but spoke with on the phone once from cold outreach, that then remained in my network and it paid off years later, where she came back and did a free talk for a group in our class. So again, LinkedIn is one of those things that the value of the network that you develop there is going to compound over time, because the more people you're connected with, the more people you have access to in the future if you want introductions. So we encourage everybody to build out that platform.
Now, of course, we don't have time to cover today, but we do go in depth with in our programs, is how do you build out your network if you have nothing to start from? How do you reach out to people cold? What do you say? What do you do on these calls and the like? You can still develop your network. As a matter of fact, one of the best ways to do it is to do it through cold outreach. And some of the most successful people that we know build it into their workflow on a weekly or monthly basis, where they sit down. Sergey said before, consistency is key. They sit down and they do a bunch of outreach. Maybe they're reaching out to people in a new industry they don't know a lot about. Maybe they're reaching out because they're recruiting a team soon and they want to meet more people in a particular function, right? The reason for it may vary depending on what you're looking for, but that's one fear that you have to get over, is reaching out to people cold that you might not even know. And of course, there's ways to do it the right way and the wrong way.
So hopefully the main takeaway here from the networking portion of our discussion is, one, understand and know how to talk about yourself in a way that gets people excited, and two, build it into your process of actually consistently doing outreach, asking for introductions, asking to talk to people at different companies, because over time that compounds. And at first it'll be 3 or 4 conversations. Over the course of 3 months, you'll probably have a couple dozen conversations, and those are now people in your network forever that can help you get inroads in companies, help you get interviews. Maybe you can help them in some way too. If you know someone that could be helpful to them and be an introduction for them, go ahead and make an introduction to them or help them in whatever way, because again, you don't know how 2 years, 3 years, 6 years down the line they can be helpful. So that really is the sort of short answer of how to start establishing your network. We are at the 7 o'clock mark right now. We want to make sure, obviously, that if you want to learn more and want to have a conversation, to have these kind of this kind of dialogue in a more structured environment. But Eva's going to drop the link here. Make sure you submit an application by tonight, actually, because we're only accepting about 5 more people into this particular program that starts on June 21st. But otherwise, we want to stay here around for another 2 more minutes, in case anybody else has any questions or things they wanted us to touch on. Thank you, Vanessa, for the great questions and dropping them in the chat here. Anyone else, including Vanessa, if you have any other final questions, please do let us know. We're happy to stick around for a few minutes and answer anything you might have. By the way, this is kind of one of those examples, again, in the future, when you come to an event, even an online event like this, giving some FaceTime, unmuting yourself, asking questions, that is also networking. It really is. It's a touch point. It makes somebody remember you. I already know Vanessa, but I would definitely remember her after this, because she asked 2 great questions, right? She comes to another event. Again, I know her again. Crystal is someone I know as well, because I've spoken with her in the past, right? So she's part of my network too now. So remember, when you come to stuff like this and events like this, whether they're virtual or physical, it's an opportunity for someone to get to know you, to maybe hopefully appreciate your background and your interests, and down the line, they can get you opportunities. So
no worries about it today. This was a webinar to start, and we turned it into a Zoom meeting. So totally fine. We do appreciate the questions and the fact that you showed up today. That already shows a lot of initiative. Hopefully you got value out of this conversation. We're going to continue to host more events like this and bring more experts in as well. Last time we had a director of product at PayPal that spoke to our group. And of course, we're going to invite more and more people in the coming weeks and months. There was a question that came in from Scott. Any tips on how to build confidence in sharing your narrative? This is going to sound really simplistic, Scott, but practice makes progress. And Obina Sergey will drop our LinkedIns into the chat. Practice makes progress. And what we do, whether it's before a sales call or before a networking event or before an event where we're trying to pitch a product or whatever it is practice. And that means either literally standing in front of a mirror and practicing your personal narrative, or getting a couple of friends together and getting their feedback on how you tell your story. Oh, you're going on too long, or oh, you didn't give me any substance in the actual conversation that we had. The only way to get better and to get more comfortable is actually to Practice it. So
to do it.
sometimes write it out. You can script it out if you need to. You know, in sales, we do this all the time where you script things out, you role play, you actually put yourself in the position where you would work on specific areas of what it is that you're trying to get better on. And it's the same exact story with your personal narrative. You know, the best people that are out there that are really smooth in doing this, not everybody's natural. A lot of people sit there and practice over and over again. And by the time you hear from them, it's something that they've done 1,000 times. So it's muscle memory to a certain degree.
You really want to put yourself in situations where you have to talk about yourself and you see people's reaction, and then you adjust from there, right? So if you're at events, if you're at an event, for example, make sure you come up to at least one or two people, start talking to them, talk about yourself, look at what their body language is. Are they looking away, starting to look somewhere else because they're losing interest? Well, that means maybe you have to adjust some of the things that you say, or maybe not talk for so long and start asking them a question. And over time, you're going to become very, very confident because, again, once you're good at talking about yourself, you're not rambling, you know exactly what you're going to say, you speak slower, you sound more confident, and then ultimately that makes you more confident.
And to answer Sola's question, yes, we will be providing access to the recording. Just make sure that you check your promotions folder. Sometimes emails like that will end up there. But if for some reason you didn't get it from us, you can also reach out to us again on LinkedIn or email. Most of you guys should have our email as well. Mine's vadim@school16.co. Very easy to guess.
All right. Great. Well, thank you, folks. Appreciate you joining us and asking the thoughtful questions. Thank you for the thank yous coming in here in the chat. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any follow-up questions as well. But great to see you all here today, and we'll see you at a future event.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.